starting to understand my power is not to teach anyone anything, but just to
Okay.
show, look what I'm doing, and you can do it too.
So, welcome to Soul Awakenings. My name is Jeff, and today I have with me Corrina. So,
Hello.
Corrina, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
I'm super glad that you offered to be interviewed, and let's get started with some basics. So, can you tell me a little bit about your background? Like, did you grow up with any type of religion or religious beliefs, or they're like dogmas, or just a little bit of your background history?
I was raised pretty religious. I was raised in a like a separated home, so I lived with my dad and my grandparents who were strict Catholics. I was baptized, everything, the whole nine, and I really bought in to God
Hmm.
and even Jesus, Mary. I never had any trouble believing in that as a child. I think because it was programmed into me, but
Yeah.
it was a lot of the rules. Like when I was a kid at 11 years old, I was like, I'm not gonna wear a dress. And my dad would be like, no, you have to. And I'd be like, well, why? Do you think God wouldn't love me if I wore pants? And I would just throw those
Yes.
questions out. So I think I've always been a little bit like that.
Hmm.
Probably because my mom on the other side, who was also Catholic, but she was a dabbler. My mom was like the kind of person who she would scry in candles, but then also then do it to scare us. So it wasn't spiritual, but she was
Mm.
doing very witchy things as a joke, or I don't really know, but I saw a lot of things, and then when I got my first library card at maybe 12, I found like the back row where all the religious texts are, and I found out you could be a real witch. So I had a Wicca phase, but for the most part, I was pretty Catholic. I felt comfortable there because it's what I knew,
Hmm.
but I never felt good about the rules, the restrictions, and this idea that there's this omnipotent force who knows me so wholly and fully, but yet somehow wouldn't accept every single part about me. It just conflicted. And I don't think I was at a point at a young age where I was thinking that, but I felt this lack of, it just didn't make sense to me, I think, inside. And I think that's what caused me to question everything when I finally became an adult at 18. I explored atheism even, but that really wasn't it for me because I was very into the paranormal and all of that kind of stuff. So
Right.
it was just a very interesting experience of having this dual, like a code switch of my personality of I'm a good Catholic girl. I'm Latina, that's like culturally embedded into my family. And then on the other hand, I am super curious about astrology, tarot. And while my grandparents were staunchly religious, my parents, they were more open-minded, and I think that's how I got a little bit of exposure. Like my dad would let me go into the witchy shops and look around and never buy anything, but sure, look, you
Yeah.
can, you know.
Yeah.
So this is a weird kind of thing, but I think a lot of Catholics find their ways to various types of paganism. It's not that far of a leap, honestly. It's like high
Yeah.
ceremony.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic as well, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, so I hear you. It's a lot of, and very similarly, it was with me. It was just, I accepted everything young, but then as I got older, I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. So, so interesting. Okay, so we're both recovering Catholics. Uh, so, um, so when do you think the belief changed for you?
Um, well, honestly, in my 20s, I was super depressed. I
Mm,
had a really traumatic childhood and I didn't have like resources to process it. So then when
mm.
I got into my 20s, I started taking kind of the absolute worst care of myself possible, like most 20-year-olds, but I
Yeah.
think that just holistically had an effect overall. I was so depressed. I was just not feeling great and physically, spiritually, mentally. And I felt, I guess, a bit, not that I felt forsaken, because even now I don't feel any resentment towards any kind of like entity that represents Catholicism, or I don't
Hmm.
have any anger for God or Jesus Christ or anything. In fact, I think those archetypes still even persist sometimes in my own current belief systems. But
Okay.
uh, I really just honestly, when I was 25, I started teaching myself tarot. And I
Mm.
wanted to learn to read tarot cards because I had that curiosity. I was into paranormal and occult stuff, and I really didn't know much, but I wanted to. And I started having experiences with that
Oh, really?
where
Can you give me an example of one of those experiences?
yeah. So for the most part, when I would sit down with my cards, it was like having a conversation with myself. Like I'm reading, I'm looking at the images, I'm really asking myself, like, what of the options on the keywords list for this card, like, seems to apply to me, kind of that vibe. But
Okay.
then sometimes because I did take a class with a teacher who taught me how to ask for my guides to help me if they were aligned with my highest and best good. And when I started to do that, I started to ask myself, the response that comes back when I'm doing these readings, the thoughts in my head, like, where are those coming from? And who is that? And is
Interesting.
that me? And
Yes.
I was really, I guess, working with that. And one time I decided I'm gonna ask. And I had a moment where I was just like trying to do a tarot reading on a life situation. And it was incredibly accurate. It was just like, whoa, yes, this makes so much sense. And so I asked, who are you? And I will try to explain it. It felt like a thought or a voice that was not mine, even
Uh-huh.
to the point that it distinctly had an accent that was very Southern. And I
Oh,
suspected
wow.
maybe it was one of my aunts who moved to the South and had passed away. But I asked my sister if she had a real, I imitated the accent almost, and she was like, no, that's not Aunt Kimmy.
Huh.
But so I asked, who are you? And I got laughs inside of me, laughs. And
Okay.
I felt like laughter and I wanted to laugh. And they were like, we're you. We're all
We're
you.
all you.
And
Wow.
I didn't know. I still struggle with seeing the divinity in my own self, like most growing, healing people. But
Yeah.
that was pretty much when I felt this feeling of, for me, it felt like that feels so true,
Yes. Yeah.
you know?
I can relate to this.
Uh,
Not the exact experience, but the knowing that this is true.
mhm,
Because it's interesting because I don't know if maybe this is the same for you. I also have the opposite where if I hear something and I'm much more open-minded like than I was, but a lot of times I will feel something and it just doesn't resonate. And the irony is I guess it could resonate maybe for somebody else, but it's like there's just something inside me that goes, no, that's not
mhm.
true. Do you get
Yeah.
that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And at the time, I had no idea about the clair senses that they talk about when you get into spirituality and you think like, what does this mean? Does this mean I'm psychic? Which personally, I do not, I don't feel like I'm psychic. I don't think I'm psychic, but I do feel connected to things. And I do
Yeah.
feel like the more I work through it, the better I get at understanding what I'm feeling, what thoughts are coming through to me. And I've kind of learned to, it's not that I'm not questioning where they're coming from, but it is just that feeling of knowing and that feeling of trust. And because I was really into the paranormal when I was younger, that all stemmed from my childhood of extreme fear of that stuff. As a child,
Oh,
it was driven into me that everything occult and paranormal is pure evil,
yes.
And I think also because now that I understand energy a little bit better, I think I was very fearful and I was living in a very distressing environment. And
Yeah.
I was feeling a lot of density around me, but I was having paranormal experiences as a child.
Oh,
And
could you tell me, could you give me an example of one or two of those?
Sure, yeah. So I grew up for a couple years living in an old Victorian house in my hometown, Vallejo, California.
Okay.
And there was the house was sort of upstairs, like you walk upstairs to get in the door. So all the bottom was not basement, but there is a sublayer where the owners of the house had mostly storage, but us kids would sneak down there, and the older kids would be like, "This is the clubhouse, this is the clubhouse," and I don't think I was even in school yet, honestly. I was probably
Wow.
4 or 5.
Okay.
I would try to go out there with them. They'd be like, "Get out, you're the little sister." And so I would go out there by myself, and there was an old woman that would watch me when I was down there. An old woman, like an old granny, like curly gray hair. I could even imagine her in my mind now because I felt like she was a person I knew. But when I
Wow.
told other people, they got creeped out. My brother confirms also experiencing different beings there. But
Oh
it was a
my.
totally like comfortable thing for me because I partially lived with my grandparents. So being watched by
Uh,
my grandma, yeah, I can play for hours like that. So I would, sneak down into the sublayer and play by myself with this granny. I didn't know her name or anything. And
uh-huh.
there was an old man that was the one my brother saw, and he was very scary,
Oh
apparently.
wow. Okay.
But that happened to me. And then also I just had a lot of fear. Like I was afraid of the dark for a very long time, up until I was a young adult,
Mm-hmm.
because I just always felt watched. I always felt
Hmm.
like the dark really scared me, and my fear would consume me. And
Sure.
so I would compare that feeling of knowing to that feeling. You know,
Hmm.
there's this feeling that happens in my body when I know something's off and I know something's not right. And I think I
Yeah.
had experienced that from a young age. And the feeling that I get when I feel like something feels true for me or feels, it resonates or whatever, it feels like very comfortable and calm, and I feel very safe. And because I had a really traumatic childhood, feeling safe is like, I've come to learn in my life that that's a big yes for me. That's why I literally said yes. I, I had no idea why I was like, oh, I want to talk to you about this stuff.
Yeah.
I felt a feeling and I went for it.
Oh well, I am glad that you did because here we are.
Yeah.
Huh.
So,
So that is really interesting. So did you sort of put that out of your mind as you got older, or
mhm.
did you forget about it, or
No,
yeah?
I became like hyper rational as a teenager because the fear was becoming really, it was, I had intense insomnia. I've had insomnia since I was a young child.
Okay.
But as a teenager, it was really getting bad because I would get so creeped out at night. My imagination, it's very powerful, I guess. And
Yeah.
I would freak out and I would be up for hours just torturing myself with fear.
Hmm.
And um so what I decided to do was to stop believing. That's honestly, I think, why I ended up
Oh,
on atheism chat groups for a time because
yeah.
in that teenage era, I've started realizing you can't be scared and be cool. Like teenagers want to go to see horror movies and teenagers want to go do dumb things at night, like walk through a cemetery or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I kind of took this control of my perspective. I didn't even realize how powerful that was at the time, but
Yeah.
I just said no, none of that's real. Like science only. When I would hear like noises or anything, I was like, it's the cat. It's the cat,
Right.
period. Don't look for the cat at all. Whatever you do, do not realize that the cat's sitting on your lap or whatever, but
Yeah.
so I just tried my best to not believe, but it was hard. I was very scared. Um, and I started to, I think, believe in the non-belief after a minute.
Yeah.
And I started finding myself at a young, influential or malleable age, that there are these people online who seemed really, really sure that there was nothing. And
Yeah.
dead over as people say,
Hmm.
but no, I it felt like very aggressive and I wanted that security of belief in a way.
Yeah.
And I also thought maybe at 18, there was a little bit of appeal in the way that they would be very like superior and like you're so dumb and unintellectual if you actually believe there's a man in the sky or whatever.
Right.
And
No,
so
that's yeah, that's powerful. And like you said,
yeah.
you want to be hip and you want to
Hmm.
be with the
Yeah.
in crowd. Yeah, and they did. To this day, there's still certain scientists out there that sort of had that have that like, swagger, like, oh, you're ridiculous. There's nothing here. What are you talking
Hmm.
about? So let me
Yeah.
ask you this. So did you have like a specific awakening experience, or has it just been a gradual progression? Or do you remember, one thing where maybe things started to
Hmm.
click for you?
Yeah, I think you can kind of hear from the story that my life, it has been somewhat gradual in a
Hmm.
sense, just through the course of my life, but
Sure.
really um, because even when I started getting into tarot, it was pretty superficial. I wasn't connecting from my heart, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a party trick almost in a sense for a couple years. And then in 2019, my dad passed away.
Oh,
And
I'm
it
sorry to
wasn't
hear that.
unexpected. Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't unexpected because he was ill, but I was not ready and I took it incredibly hard. And so when that happened, I I just had a lot of things that I had to do for to just on a loved one when I was my dad's only child, so I
Oh,
handled all of his closing up his life stuff. And that was a really depressing process and really sad. And I felt very alone. And I was like yearning for something. And I had a little bit of practice with like kind of working on stuff in therapy as I got older and then finding like the Virgin Mary or the Virgen de Guadalupe, I would see that as this mother figure that I could use in my own emotional self-healing work. But that was really it. And it wasn't so, I was still not 100% sure if anything was going on, if I was
yeah.
connecting to anything. It wasn't so like, oh, I'm getting it now, In
Yeah.
2019, when my dad passed, I kind of reached this rock bottom of grief and depression, and I felt truly that I had nothing to live for. And I was so sad, and I had been depressed for so much of my life. I had been, experiencing a lot of painful things throughout my time that I was over it. And I was starting to feel like I'm not gonna get through this. I'm not gonna get better. And I don't want to feel this way anymore. I'm done. But I don't want to hurt because I'm married. I am happily married. So to say I had nothing to live for shows I was at a very dark,
Yeah.
lonely place. I was
Yeah.
encased in my grief. And in hindsight, I can see how I put myself in that position a little bit as
Hmm.
well, but I like leaned in a little bit too hard. But
Yeah.
also, I felt like I was yearning for something, but I felt like I don't know why I didn't reach out. I was doing tarot, I was trying, but I wasn't really opening my heart. That's what I realized because finally I decided I'm not gonna hurt my husband. I'm not gonna hurt my parents or my siblings by
Hmm.
ending it. I could never do that, but I really want to die. Like I really want to die. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start doing things and I'm gonna hope that I die doing them. And right now I'm
Wow.
gonna go for a walk and I hope I get hit by a effing car. And I went for a walk and I actually like started to feel things. I started to notice the sky and the trees, and I had this little voice inside of me that was like, "See, like we will meet you if you walk this way," in a sense. And oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional to recount this,
It's
but
okay. I'm so sorry.
no, it's okay because honestly, I'm thankful that I had this experience.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, of course, there are things in moments you think you would change, but I'm okay. And it was because I had a dream. I had an intense series of dreams where first I was being given essentially information and instructions, and it was very weird because I thought maybe if this would ever happen to me, I always have had vivid dreams. I actually I actually had an experience where my parents claim that as a toddler, I like predicted the death of a missing child because of a dream.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
which is it's a sad story though. That's why I didn't want to say that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. But
Um,
well,
but anyway, I was shown like an image in my dream. I almost felt like I was looking at the back of those instruction manuals in an airplane that shows you with
yes.
little stick figure drawings like what to
Yes.
do. It looked
Yes.
like that, but it was black and white, and it was just like a little guy. And then he was just a black line drawing, and then right
Okay.
above him, like layered almost like a stamp off center, like a 3D stamp or something,
Uh-huh.
was a yellow version of him, like, and they were like, Karina, you need to raise your spirits. And they just kept showing me this image and saying, you
So
need to raise your
this is
spirit
in this
in a
is
dream.
yeah, but the year 20 like 2019,
This is
2020.
2019. Yeah,
Okay.
2019.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm just super depressed, and it's like, you need to raise your spirits. This might have been before I took the walk. I couldn't tell you to be sure, but it
Okay.
was telling me I needed to it was showing me an image of a person whose literal soul was being uplifted out of their body slightly. There was an overlap,
Wow.
but that's the picture. And I was just like, what? Like, what the hell? I don't know what that means. I don't know how. Like, I don't
Ye-
know how. I would love to. And then I just kept trying. I knew I wasn't gonna do anything. So then I was like, I guess I better start trying little things to make my life better. It was a very connected thing between my mental well-being and my spiritual well-being and my even my physical, you know? Um
Okay.
and so I then had another dream like 6 months later after that. This was in November of 2019,
Okay.
and I saw a huge black jaguar. She was a giant. Her whole head was bigger than my body. Because when I stood before her at her face, I could feel her breath on me, warming my whole body. I could see her beautiful yellow eyes.
So
And I
was there
just knew,
fear involved with when this was
no,
happening? No fear. Okay.
no, I felt like she was my grandmother. That's
Ooh,
who I felt
interesting.
like she was. My grandmother was still alive, though, both of them. So I
Mm.
was like, this is a grandmother energy. And it's very interesting, but I felt so safe. Clearly, there's a connection with me and grandmothers because I don't know why these grandmother spirits take care of me, but I'm very thankful to
Right.
them. But anyway, she told me the secrets of the universe. Like, I woke up and I was like, whoa. But what did she say?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So, what are the secrets of the
I
universe?
couldn't remember. I could
Oh
remember
no.
so clearly the feeling of her, the vision of her, and I could remember what we talked about, even though no words were spoken. But
Uh-huh.
I had nothing. I had nothing. And I was really confused. And I sat with this for a while. I kept seeing her in dreams. Then I started seeing her in meditations. Just she would just pop up in my mind, and I would start visualizing with her. I eventually began like visualizing her walking in circles around my home, like warding it in ways and things like that.
Mm,
Nobody taught me this. It was what was happening in my imagination naturally. And I'm saying it's happening in my imagination not to imply that it's not real, but
mm,
just because I feel like when I have watched content with like psychics and people who are tapped in,
hmm.
I feel that they don't really explain how mundane this stuff kind of feels, and how it really isn't confirmed that this is extremely real until you watch things play out, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
anyway, she told me the secrets of the universe. I couldn't remember, but I was like, okay, I guess I have this spirit guide. Then I spoke to a friend who I grew up with who is, a Native American and a spiritual practitioner and who has kind of ways passed down to her from elders. And
Okay.
she does dream interpretation, and she told me, I'm pretty sure that's you. That is you. That being is you.
The
And I was
Panther
just like,
is you.
oh, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And I had no idea. I was more lost than ever because I was like, what did she say? What are the answers? And that was
Hmm.
in 2019. And I think it took time. I basically started to come to terms with the fact that like I received it. You know what I mean? And it was
Yeah.
in here or in here. It was somewhere in here. And I would get it when I needed to or when I was ready, or maybe it was just there. I didn't know. It was kind of hard, but she kept appearing and I started developing this relationship. Even to this day, I really love black jaguars now, and I just feel like it's a guide for me, but
Mm.
those dreams really started it off with me actually receiving literal instructions on things, but then they're not fully explained. And I think I don't know if my gifts are still developing, if I have gifts. I'm still figuring that out, but what it did was it started enabling me to see reality in
Okay.
layers, if that makes sense. So then I began to
Try and
walk through
describe that
the world.
to the best of your abilities, because I kind of I think I know what you mean, but well,
Yeah.
just try and describe it for me.
So I felt almost like when you have a video game, right? And you're playing a video game,
Hmm.
and then sometimes you can get special maps that you can see
Mm.
that they show you the map, but it's a different view where you can see enemies, or maybe you can see a location that you need to head to. It's almost like that, where I feel like I'm seeing everything normal people are seeing. But in my perception, I'm seeing like layers of additional map information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
And
Now, just out of curiosity, are they? Do you ever see like pixels, like pixelated things look pixelated or no?
no, and
Okay.
honestly, all of this is in my mind's eye, truly. It's not like
Right.
if you watch a movie where somebody puts a helmet on and they have the digital input
Yeah.
on. It's not like that.
Right.
It's in my inner perception, but
Sure.
it's it's proving to be, I don't know, really helpful. It's making me but it's making life it, no, it made life hard because there was now like an additional layer of information and truth that I was picking up on and I was
Okay.
interacting with. And I was
Okay.
kind of realizing, oh, this I don't want to be part of this. Systems, people, relationships, social dynamics that I had played out a million times, and then I was finally starting to see through them. See from almost a bird's eye view, kind of well, honestly, to simplify it, what I was seeing was like what wasn't rooted in love, to be truthful. That's really what it came down to, is that I started to not that that does sound really judgmental, but I guess I was
No.
just seeing my options of what I could participate in or not.
Okay.
And I started to notice that I had a choice in it. I didn't realize that at all. Like my whole life, I thought this is what I should do. I'm gonna
Hmm.
do what I should do. I was a people pleaser through and through.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
I had this job that I was so proud of. I got so much validation for having this job because it was like high paying, sounded impressive on paper, you know,
Hmm. Sure.
and I could just see like, oh, this is what's making me sad because not because this is a toxic environment, but because it wasn't aligned for me. And that's
Yeah.
also information I could start to see. It
Yeah.
wasn't what I wanted. And I think before I didn't even know, I don't know. I thought I was only kind of I wanted to want the things that supposedly made you successful in life. But then I had success and I wasn't happy at all. I
Mm.
was so miserable. I wanted to quit my job. Then my dad died and I totally checked out. Then COVID happened and if you think, I mean, I probably shouldn't say what I was doing or not doing, but yeah, they wanted us back in the office.
Right.
And, like I was miserable. I hated it. I wanted to leave. And I was also like trying to honor that in what I thought my spirit was telling me, be
Hmm.
honest, be loving, be open, follow your heart. So I was having pretty candid conversations with my employers, not necessarily about my spiritual awakening at first, but I
Okay.
was saying, I'm not happy. I think I want to move on. And they were like, what can we do? What can we help? Like, we want you to stay.
Right.
And then it started leaking out of me. Like, the spirituality and the curiosity and honestly the playfulness that kind of comes along with my awakening,
Yes.
it started to leak out at work. They started like not making serious, you need to take a drug test kind of accusation, but
Yeah.
oh, I'll have what she's having. Like, oh, what are you smoking today? Like, whatever you want are on and must be some great stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, great. Really, I
Yeah.
thought I have a powerful sense of projection, and I thought, you guys, I'm here. I know now what you guys all know. And they were just kind of like, you're crazy, and you're not a quantum physicist. So you don't
Right.
know what you're. And I didn't know what I was talking about, but I was seeking intensely for validating information online. It was just
Hmm.
an intense time of from 2019 to about 2022 of just like to the outside world losing my mind. But
Yeah.
to me, I felt I was coming into wholeness and truth and understanding like the nuance of reality. And
Yes.
then I got laid off from COVID, which was a huge blessing because I did not want to be at that job, but I had the golden handcuffs. I couldn't
Hmm.
walk
Yes.
away from that money. It was too easy, too good.
Yeah.
Um, but I got laid off, and then I told my partner like I'm not ready to go back to work. Like I need some time off. And like I know that's not ideal because we're gonna struggle extremely hard, but I need it.
Hmm.
And we were able to buy a house with the inheritance of my dad's insurance, of his house selling and things like
Okay.
that. So we bought a house, which was probably the only reason that we were able to afford for me to not find a
Yeah.
new high-paying, stressful job. But
Yes. It's
between
kind of
then
nice
and
when the universe
now,
helps you out that way. Not
yeah,
not that you wanted your dad to pass,
no, no, not
but
at
yeah, but
all.
sometimes things just work out the way they're supposed to.
But death actually really was a strong part of my awakening because while I was grieving
Hmm.
and I was reaching this like doneness with living, I was
Yeah.
also having profound experiences that were showing me death isn't the end. Um, Prior to my dad passing, we would go hang out, me and my husband would go get catch a live show together or whatever, and we would have fun talks over drinks and stuff. And we had
Hmm.
this conversation once, like a morbid, like, let's talk about our funeral, like what songs are we playing, like blah blah blah.
Uh-huh.
And he had a specific REM song, this one goes out to
Oh
the one
yeah.
I love. So that was his choice, and I didn't know the song. He showed me that night, and I was like, okay, okay. And so the weekend he died, or the weekend we were gonna have his funeral, was also the week of my birthday, which it was just an incredibly weird and hard time. And my husband was like, we were across state lines from my dad, but close enough where you can drive, but
Hmm.
he was like, I'm gonna take her home for her birthday. Like, she needs to get out of this house and get back to our home and like try to have an okay day, and we'll
Yeah.
come back for the funeral. And then there was a huge snowstorm on a mountain pass that we would have to drive through to get back. So we
Uh,
ended up having to like charge for flights. I had to go through LA, back up to Northern California.
oh my goodness.
And I heard that song multiple times in the airport.
Whoa. I love
Yeah.
those. But
Yeah.
that's another thing I have really, I think that maybe we could stress to people too is I used to blow things up like that off. And then when you really open yourself up, like, um, I mean, they are signs. Like that's not a coincidence,
Mhm.
in my mind. So that's
Yeah.
really cool that that happened to you.
Yeah, it felt like really, I felt sure in those moments, like he's not gone. He's just
Yeah,
not here. And
right.
then he came to me in dreams, and I never saw the place we were in the dream, and I told my mom, I described it. I told her what I saw, and she was like, "That was your dad's trailer when we first started dating."
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, "Oh, okay." But I got to sit with him, and so I had time with what I really do believe was him, is him. I feel him with me all the time in so many contexts. And it wasn't even the first time I felt something like that. I'd experienced another person pass away, and I felt their energy kind of release. I felt it in the
Hmm.
sun shining on my face, and maybe I'm creating that, sure, but I have
Yeah.
also come to realize that that is my connection to divinity. As a creator, because I can create that. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah, we're
So it doesn't
co-creating.
make it not real for me. But it took me time to get comfortable. And when I lost my job, I was like, I'm gonna go full-fledged into doing readings. And I think that is how I started to come to get the information, I guess, that was given to me by that black jaguar and
Yeah.
find out what it was saying, which for me it was just really showing me like the truly the oneness of all things, I guess. And kind of the love of it all. And
Yes.
also like that we are all kind of doing our best and sometimes we're failing. And so when we experience these evil people out there in the world, a lot of the time they're just doing their best and it's
Yeah.
not going well, you know? And
Yeah.
I've been there myself, you
Yes. I can
know?
totally relate to that. Sometimes I get frustrated with, the things that you see kind of going on in the country and everything.
Hmm.
But then I just kind of realize like, they are kind of just doing their best. This is what they just kind of what they feel is the right thing to do. And it's kind of unfortunate, in some ways, because I realize one of the things that I realized when I really had my awakening was like just how much our thoughts dictate our world,
Hmm.
and they're just thoughts. But you know what? You can really get caught up in some negative thinking, and that can spiral. And I didn't have a death, but I did have a big loss, and I couldn't get out of it. And I just things just continually got worse and worse and worse, and I fell into the whole victim mentality, and and it was just because I held his thoughts as truth,
Hmm.
you know. So I can totally relate to what you're talking about.
When you
Um,
when you mentioned that victim mentality, I
mhm.
really related to that. And because I had so much stuff like happen to me as a child,
Yes,
as a
yes. Mhm.
teenager, within my family, within my home,
Yeah,
um, that I really thought that could be an identity for me, you know?
yeah.
And I think I really had like, emo poetry phases that really fed into it. And I think even in some moments I've said things like, "Oh, I can't make art if I'm happy," and things like that, which is totally BS. But
Right.
at the time, I crutched to my pain. I held it. I I treasured it almost because it was my story, and I felt that it made me me, and I felt that it made me valid. But I also felt a lot of pain because I couldn't talk about it with people, and I didn't
Mm,
I couldn't tell people, I wasn't sharing my story to be seen or anything, but I was
right.
just like edgelording about and sort of being really sad and leaning hard into the victim mentality and then later into my grief. And I think my awakening process made me understand that like that's not who I am. And it was just an
Yes.
identity that I was wearing and that I could put it down when I was ready. And it took me time to be ready,
That's
In the
that's
last
I
two
love that
years,
analogy. Yeah.
like I decided I was gonna try to do therapy and try to get help. And what's funny is that what's always missing for me in therapy is spirituality. And it's
Yeah.
like leading me toward what I'm trying. When I left my job, I
Mhm.
didn't go back. I totally like changed my life, my lifestyle. When we bought our home, we downsized massively to the point where people were like, this isn't enough space. It's two bedrooms. Like,
Right. Yeah.
things like that. And what are you doing? So still no job?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well,
See,
must be
this is
nice.
where so many of us fall into the trap, and I'm glad you're talking about this too, because there is so much pressure on us just from society because like you said, like the norms are, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? You're supposed to do this. Like,
Mhm.
and then and you believe it. Like, I mean, you go through a lot of your life believing it, and then you reach a point where you go like, well, according to whose roles, you know?
Right.
Like, but society has these rules that we're supposed to follow,
Hmm.
especially in the United States. That you have to go to college, you have to get married, you have to have a super big house,
Hmm.
you have to have like the best cars, and then you'll be happy. That's the whole thing. And then it kills me because like you were talking about the house, like I see these celebrity homes and everything, and the irony is when they they give tours of the home like online or whatever. Not that I've watched a ton of them, but I've seen them. They use like the same rooms everybody else does. They use the living room, the bedroom, and the kitchen, and the rest of
Yeah.
the house is a showpiece
Hmm.
that they can have people over and say, "Look at this great house." Yeah, I haven't been in this room in 3 months, but
Yeah.
it's incredible. But we're so conditioned that that is what our happiness that is our happiness. It's that we have to have that stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that's another example of the layers that I was explaining where I'm seeing this and I'm explaining it to people like I'm simplifying my life, I don't want the
Hmm.
stress, but it's also on another layer this like, well, I know I'm recognizing a machine that I don't want to, because I was working for a toy company and it wasn't cheap toys. It was like only the wealthy families are getting these toys, you know? So
Yeah.
dealing with great people, they don't need any of this, and yet they're making it seem like it's the end of the world because their stuff is a day late or whatever, you know? Um,
Right.
so I I started to notice like I'm polluting the earth. I'm polluting the earth. This is junk. I had this house and I was raised not wealthy, so I've always been great about getting my stuff for free, passing it forward when I did have a, four, three-bedroom home or whatever. I opened it to family and friends so they could move to the city I was staying in, like, oh, come stay with me for free, find your place, kind of like that, where my landlord, who was my boss at the time, called it my halfway house. But really, you just fill it with stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Fill it with stuff. And then that stuff gets uncool, and you need to get the news. Like, I started to recognize that machine and my part in it. And I started feeling this feeling of like, well, if I have to have a job, because I mean, I do live in a reality.
Right.
I've tried manifesting money, and I really cannot tell myself that that's why my dad passed because I would lose it, you know? Like, that's
Yeah.
the only time I have gotten money, but
Hmm.
otherwise, I've always just worked hard and done it kind of that old-fashioned way, right? Making
Sure.
money by overworking and like, all of
Yeah.
these things. But I was like, if I have to have a job, I don't want to do anything like this. I did get a part-time position for a corporation, but only because I'm going to school now for social work. I'm like, I clearly have to have
Oh,
a job. I'm gonna do, if I have to go 8 hours a day, I'm gonna use that 8 hours a day to do something that feels good. And I
yes.
feel because I have this perspective now of
Uh-huh.
really, I try so hard to be non-judgmental. It still happens because I forget who I really am a lot of the time. Sometimes I still believe I'm just Corrina, you know?
Right.
And but when I can be mindful, I can navigate a lot of situations with a lot more ease than other people, it seems.
Hmm.
So, and I've
Sure.
seen a lot of darkness in my life. So I just feel like I could be of use there. And if I have to work, I'm going to do that. And I had multiple of my siblings tell me school is a waste of money. Like, if you're going to do anything, do a trade. And like, they're not teaching you anything. They're brainwashing you to be liberal. And I'm like, honey, I'm already that guy. Like, I'm
Yeah.
already that person. And I'm just becoming more so because I'm almost back at a point of being done like I was
Hmm.
before, but not with life. Instead, it's like with your life, with your reality.
Yeah.
I
I
don't have to be
love
part
that.
of it, and I don't want to add my energy toward creating it anymore. You know?
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. 100%. It's interesting that a lot of people go through these things. Like they end up not talking or sort of losing touch with people that sort of resonate that negativity or that vibe. A lot of life changes, especially jobs is super common, relationships, new relationships. But I did the same thing with the job thing. I just like I couldn't do it anymore. I'm like I just it was like once it's once I had the awakening, I'm like, man, if I'm gonna do, I was just like you. I'm like, if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do something that's gonna make me feel good. It's gonna help people. It's gonna be positive.
Hmm.
I'm done with this, this the I love how you call it the machine because that's kind of
Yeah.
what it is.
And it's so interconnected. And, you mentioned before all of the unfortunate things that are happening in the country, in the world, and all
Hmm.
of these things feel so connected. And it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm gonna defeat it. But it's
Hmm.
more like, remember that scene in Finding Nemo when they're in the net and they're like,
Yes.
everyone, swim down.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at now. I'm like, yeah, we're in the net. Let's just start swimming down. What's the
Right.
It's that or we go up, like let's swim down,
Yeah.
everyone. And I'm starting to recognize that more and more as I grow, and I'm 36, so I'm kind of still growing up, I feel, which is
Hmm.
I'm a late bloomer, but I am, and I'm starting to realize that my like what I can do other than, of course, be of service when I can, use my time and career to maybe help if I can. Although that's another system that I'll be part of and have to
Hmm.
navigate mindfully, but hopefully I'll see those layers. But
Right.
you know, I guess I just feel that I can't convince anyone of anything and I can't teach them anything, is what I've realized because I wanted somebody to give me answers so bad for so long and I went to so many people and
Yeah.
I learned from teachers. I did mystery schools, I did psychic readings.
Wow.
I booked tarot readings, astrology readings. I did a lot of seeking, just wanting somebody to give me validation and give me hope and give me ideas and give me the answers to the things I was questioning. And, what happened was I started to realize like, it's me, it's my process, and I will get there. I
Hmm.
did get there, and nobody could have rushed me through that. Nobody could have sped me along that process, or I wouldn't have gotten it. And I know that because I had the tarot cards, I had certain access to things. And until I was at a vibrational state where I could meet it, I couldn't comprehend it. I couldn't understand it. And now I'm starting to understand my power is not to teach anyone anything, but just to
Okay.
show look what I'm doing. And you could do it too. You could be
Yes.
happy. You could be love. It's your choice. And you can heal yourself. And in fact, that might be the only one who can heal you.
Agreed. Agreed. I love it. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk. Um, if wrapping up here, um, is there anything you want to say to maybe people that have don't know anything about awakening, maybe just heard a little bit about it and or maybe curious or were inspired by anything you said? Is there anything, that you want
Yeah,
to say to the listeners, I guess, if you want
sure. I'll say something that somebody told me, which was exactly what I needed to start, right?
to? Okay.
Which was about God. Like, what is God? Where is God? How do you find God? Source, spirit, energy, the universe, you call it what you will.
Hmm.
Um, what I feel is important to know is that you have a connection to the source inherently. It's at the center of your heart and it literally cannot be disconnected. That's what I was told by a teacher, and I needed so badly to hear that because when you have shame and you've been imperfect, sometimes you feel alienated from that higher power where you feel so humble, I guess, about
Hmm.
it that you think it's not for you anymore or you've lost your chance. And all you have to do is remember that it's always there, it can never be severed. And that is all you've got to do to tap back in and connect. And that's just the first step. And trust what comes up for you from there and listen to it and follow it. Follow the curiosity. You have it. It's in you. It's not me. It's not anybody else. It's in you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I one of my questions was actually going to be like, what is God to you? But you more or less just said it right there. I think the best explanation that I've ever sort of really resonated with was we're just fractals of source energy.
Yeah.
It's just like
Can I?
if you shine a light through a prism and you see the rainbow and they're all different colors, that's just
Mhm.
what it is. Go ahead, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if I could share one of the images I was shown in a dream when I was really curious, like, what is God? Like, help me understand it. And I was shown sort of like energy, white energy, but in the shape of a giant octopus
Mm.
that had millions of tentacles. And it zoomed in for me on two tentacles, and it was this little puppet show of me and my husband talking to
Oh
each
my
other.
God, I love this.
And I was like, okay. And I got that a long time ago to the point when I was at a certain point, I thought, maybe God is an octopus. Still don't know, but if there is an octopus. I'm connecting to it right here.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, I kind of I could totally it's funny when you were describing that I completely visualized that in my head. And that's in a way in a weird way that's kind of, you have this source energy and then you have all these strands of tentacles
Hmm.
and they're just all little bright lights, all but they're all connected back to source
Yeah.
energy, to God,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it. And then what's amazing is at the same time not only are we connected to source, we're also all connected to each other, and it's really beautiful. I think it's absolutely amazing. I mean, and the thing that like you, I think it's like you can feel it. Like when you meditate, when you sit there and you really just, allow yourself to turn off everything. I mean, you really feel the connection. So
Yeah. The challenge is remembering that you can do that any moment. You can feel
yes.
it whenever you want. You just gotta go there.
Yeah, yeah, because we are very, very programmed.
Yeah, it is. That's where I think a lot of us who are going through awakening are at various stages in figuring out how to make being a human work with the
Yeah,
memory of our other selves.
yes, yeah. So, I don't know. Any last words before we wrap up
No,
here?
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was a really cool conversation, and I was so glad to connect with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and coming on and being so candid and honest and it's a really beautiful story and everything. And yeah, so thanks again.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching the video. Remember to subscribe and like, and I'll see you next time.